Hi, it's Melissa Renee at Fiery for Deep Blue, and I'm here at the Epoxy Resin store, and we're going to get ready to make an ocean seascape painting, and I'll walk you through all the steps and you can follow along. So this is a wood panel. I like to create my artwork on a wood surface instead of canvas. I feel like the wood helps to support the weight of the resin quite nicely. It's been primed and spray painted with a black flat spray paint. Could it be a different color? Absolutely. Could it be white? Yes, I tend to go with a black base to start with. I feel like it really helps to support the vibrancy of the pigments. And if it were white, of course, you're still going to get a beautiful effect. I just feel like after trying both ways, my preference is to work with a darker base to begin with. So I've got my lineup here of products that I'm going to use. One of my go-to for white is the epoxy paste by Just Resin. This is a product out of Australia, and it's made specifically to work within resin. And these are black diamond mica powders, and we sell these here at the Epoxy Resin store. And they work beautifully within resin, and we'll get a little bit closer look at these shortly. No matter what type of art I'm working on, whether it's a seascape or just an abstract painting, I like to create with a few colors. I don't think it looks as great with just one or two or three. So today we've got 5 things we're working with. We've got the white for the water, the foamy white part. This is a deep sea blue, Bora Bora blue, diamond Caribbean blue, and a little bit of white diamond effect. So I tend to use this quite a bit, or something that's similar to it. It's got a little bit of kind of an iridescent look to it. So that incorporated along in with the waves is a really nice effect. The resin that I'm going to use today is Platinum Clear Epoxy. It's a 2-part epoxy, so mixed in a 1-to-1 ratio. This is like a general purpose epoxy, and you can't go wrong with this product. It's got about a 35 to 45 minute window of working time once mixed. So my tip is, before you get started and mixing your product, plan ahead and know what colors you're going to be working with first, because a lot of times that will take some time picking out what color you want to work with. So pick your color first and then mix your resin. We're going to be using a larger container to mix with. We've got our markings on the side. There's a lot of markings to pick from, but when you mix, make sure you find the ounces column. That's what we're going to be working with, is measuring in ounces today. This is a 36 by 36 panel, and we're going to be mixing, takes about 45 ounces of resin. So we're going to do the 48 just for measurement's sake, and we'll do the hardener goes in first, which is the part B. It's a little bit looser consistency than its counter, which is the actual resin, which we'll pour in second. As you're mixing, you'll notice that the consistency is, you'll kind of see the two products swirl in together. As you continue to stir, the viscosity will loosen up a little bit. And we'll talk about mixing here in just a second. I've chosen this large stick to stir with just because of the size of the container. I don't use the drill. I have just sticks that I work with. So you'll see in a sec when we pour in that stirring is one of the most important things. Proper measurement and stirring long enough are 2 of the most important things for getting a really beautiful finished product. If you've mixed and something goes wrong, like it doesn't cure or it's tacky to the touch after it should have been cured, you've done probably one of 2 things incorrectly. Didn't measure properly or didn't stir long enough. So those are 2 of the most important things that we'll work with. So when we're mixing, I like to keep the stick down to the bottom of the container and then do a steady swipe all the way around. And then once it loosens up a little bit, I'll give the stick a swipe on the edge of the container. But working with this stick in one direction, you're not really whipping into the product. You are going to see bubbles created as you're stirring. There's really no way around that, but that's okay, because later, after we've created our piece, I will use this little torch to go over and pop the bubbles out at the end. So let's get started. I like to double glove because once I've mixed my formula, I like to, what I call prime the board prior to starting the creation. And so I'll use my gloved hands and spread everything out really nice, and then get the edges too. So then your hands are really dirty, and I just like to peel that top layer of glove off. Since your hands get kind of sweaty in the gloves, if you double glove, you'll have that fresh pair underneath. Just helps, just easier. So double gloving here. And we'll start with the part B first. And I always say, once you've opened a lid and you pour, be sure and put that lid back on right away, because even though they're different colored lids, you can tend to pick up the wrong lid and they'll stick and cure, and then you won't be able to get it out. So back to my measurement, doing ounces here. I'll mix 24 ounces of the part B, which is the hardener. That's gonna go in first. And part A, which is the actual resin itself. Probably notice even as it's pouring out of here, it's a lot thicker. Sometimes you have to give the bottle a little squeeze. And we'll put a good lid on that too. Set these out of the way. And 3 minutes is really all it takes. I've got my timer set, and I'm just going to keep my stick at the bottom of the container throughout the stirring process. I'm not going to change directions, and I'm not whipping it like a cake batter while you're stirring. Just keep the stick at the bottom. It will help to eliminate some of the bubbles, but like I said, they're kind of inevitable. They're going to be in there, but we'll get them out at the end. Swiping all around the edge and just continuing that process for 3 minutes. So now that I've mixed my product for 3 minutes, I'm going to take what's in here and split this up into the amount of cups for colors I'm going to be using, which was the 5. And then I'm going to leave a little bit to prime the board with. So I'll just leave that there and let it drain onto the panel. And this is that epoxy paste, titanium white, from Just Resin. This one is from Australia. And it doesn't take very much. It's highly concentrated. So just a little bit on the end of the stick for this amount of resin is plenty. It's just important to mix your pigment into the mixture, just like it was when you were mixing the resin itself. Some of the pigment can end up sticking to the edge of the container, and you might not notice it at first, but once you've poured it out onto the panel, you might see what I call little fish eyes. So really scrape the edges of the container to mix that thoroughly. I would normally use a little bit longer stick for this container, and I do have that for the others, just because the depth makes it a little bit easier when mixing, but this little guy's gonna have to work. gonna do the white diamond effect next, and I just removed a little bit out of that container because I don't want as much of this as I had originally chosen. So for the amount of resin that's in this container, really about the size of, I don't know, I call it a fat quarter, can go into there. Same with the mica powders. When mixing, you want to just kind of keep checking around the edge of the container to make sure that there's not any pigment that's stuck to the sides. And when mixing, I always get asked how much pigment goes into the mixture. It doesn't need to be any more than 10% of the whole mixture of the container. So if you put too much pigment in, it's going to do what's called a flash cure, and it'll get really thick very quickly and start to warm up too fast, and it really is unusable after that. It's always best to add a little bit first, and then you can always add more to it. And once you're mixing, you can always lift that stick up and see just how transparent or opaque it's going to be. If you've ever worked, these are more of the diamond effect and sparkly mica powders that Black Diamond makes, but they do also make a matte finish, and so that option is available. I have noticed that when you use a matte, the mixing process takes just a little bit longer to mix those pigments in to the resin without having like the little fisheye around the edge of the cup. You'll see on a lot of social media some of the green and blues with the white. Last one, Diamond Caribbean Blue. When it has the word diamond on the name, it's got a little bit more of a sparkly, reflective component to it. And they all have like a luster to them, but this is a little bit more sparkly than the others. And you can see that. Right away. So here's our lineup. We've got the white paste and the white diamond effect, and then we have the Bora Bora blue and the deep sea blue and the diamond Caribbean blue. You'll notice I've left this container just turned upside down on the panel and allowed it to drain onto the board. What's really cool, we have this product here too. They're the silicone mats that this is sitting on. Just pull one out of there. These are cool because you can take your container once it's finished and you can leave it turned upside down on the mat, and the remainder can drain into the mat and it'll cure, and then you can just pick it off once it's dry and reuse it. So these are really nice to have in the studio. I'm just going to move these out of the way while I do my little priming here. And this is where the double glove comes into play. So this is just enough out here just to give a really thin coat over the board. Will it work without doing this? Absolutely. But I feel like this kind of helps the pigments slide across each other when we get ready to move it around with the heat gun. Okay, now that everything has been covered all across the top and around to the sides as well, this is where the gloves can come off. And we'll just throw those away. I just think it's so much easier than to try to go back on and put on a pair of gloves on a pair of sweaty hands. So let's get our colors back over here. And I'm going to be maneuvering the pigments across the panel with a heat gun. That's where all of the creation really comes from, is working with the heat gun. It's not a hair dryer, it is a heat gun. So there's not a really strong force of air that comes out, it's really just the heat. And one of the things to keep in mind when working with this is the tip obviously gets extremely hot, and then it has a tail end, so when you're finished you just sit it on its tail each time. There's a couple of speeds on there. I've never noticed a difference. It feels the same to me, so either one. But really drilling down into the artwork is really not what we're going for. It's the slight movement of blowing the pigments across each other that help to create really the beauty of the painting. So you'll see that in just a sec. What I tend to like to do is start with my darker color, which here it's the deep sea blue. I'm just going to kind of pour and alternate some of the colors across the panel and then start maneuvering them. And then I'll just leave that upside down and let the rest drain out. The second color is the Bora Bora. Thanks. I'm going to save just a little bit of that for a minute. They continue to just kind of blow across each other. You see how the pigments really just blend and create really kind of some really beautiful patterns on their own by just blowing across it with the heat. So I'm just going to keep that going. When I get closer to the bottom, I'll add in the white. That's the white diamond effect. So if you're looking for a white that's not super dark or bright, it's a good variation color to add in, like to give some variation to the wave. So it's not so opaque, it's not so stark, but it gives a good contrast along with that white that is definitely more opaque. And then this is that opaque epoxy paste, the titanium white. So you're going to see the difference in how much brighter that is up against that silvery white mica. Looks like everything is in its place. So what I'm going to do now is just go around the edges and wipe anything that's kind of rolled over the edge so it doesn't leave such a harsh drip line. I mean, you can leave it and just let it drip over the edge and wherever it lands, but I'm just gonna kind of smooth that in. Then I always run my finger under the edge too, get all that drip off. So at this point, you might be able to see just a little bit of bubbles that have remained in the resin, even though I was using the heat gun. What I'm gonna do now is use the torch to pop out the bubbles, and just being careful not to overheat it and scorch it in any one particular area. So got the torch here and the flame will shoot out to about here. So I just go in like a little circular pattern over the whole piece. And I'll do it in segments since my arm doesn't reach all the way. So even as this is being heated, the resin continues to move as it's popping the bubbles, and a lot more of those little cell action will keep being created. Even just the mica powders alone, when they cross over each other, they start to create those little wavy type patterns. But with the addition of the epoxy paste, which you can kind of see how that starts to generate more of that depth into the painting. Either one are great, with the addition of the paste or without it. And so that's it. This is an epoxy pour Seascape painting created with the premium clear epoxy, the 2-part resin, and hope you like it.